As I start so many homilies, I'd like to use the same verse of St. Peter to Jesus on the Mount of the Transfiguration. It is good for all of us to be here. Bishop Persico, Dr. Taylor, Dr. Iwanenko, faculty and staff, graduates, students, university trustees, and the many family members and friends of our graduates, I thank you for the honorary degree and the privilege of being your commencement speaker this afternoon. Dear fellow graduates, it's an honor to join you as a member of the December class of 2022 and to share this stage with you. I've just received my degree on this stage. Shortly, you will as well. These past few years have been challenging ones. You graduates know it. You've had to adjust almost daily to new circumstances. You encountered new limitations and you had to accommodate to new modes of learning. You had to reimagine your college experience, and you did it with the help of a remarkably gifted and committed faculty and staff. You've developed what many call resiliency. Some people use the word grit. It's that adaptability in the midst of challenges that helps us stay on track for what's important. Grit is hard won, but it's invaluable in personal and professional life. In God's providence, your grit grew here and is needed in the world. As you heard from what Dr. Taylor said and what's written in the book, I have a lot of memories from Gannon. My earliest memories actually are sprinkled with those of Gannon. I remember we had 8 in the family, and my mother would drive my father down to campus in the station wagon. She'd drop my dad off on 7th Street, right where the arch is, and he would go into his office in the English department in the old theater. He started here in 1959, and he taught here for many years after. My 5 brothers, we all grew up going to basketball games here in this arena, cheering for the Knights. We knew the likes of Monsignor Nash. We knew Monsignor Yale. We knew Doc Freeman and many others. Eventually, all 6 Rouch boys graduated from Gannon, and the last one, my youngest brother Jake, is here this afternoon. He graduated in 1989. But you know, my Gannon bonds are not just my father's or my brother's. My Gannon bonds are very personal and real for me. I was on this campus for 5 years. I was involved as a commuter in student government. I got involved in campus ministry and then was a resident advisor in Worley Hall for 2 years. So I lived off campus and I lived on, and I was very involved. But it's here on this campus that I discerned that the Lord was calling me to apply to seminary. 39 years ago, on this very stage, I received my bachelor's degree from Bishop Michael Murphy and then President Dr. Joseph Scatino. Why so much has changed in the world and here at Gannon, my life and yours since then, the Gannon mission, which formed me deeply, the Catholic mission. This mission helped me discern my vocation, and it continues to animate life here. I trust that it's impacted each of you. I hope that the words of St. Paul found on the mosaic on 8th Street outside of Palumbo Hall, the Palumbo building, have found a place in your own experience. These words have always meant a lot to me. St. Paul says, "Do not conform yourself to this age, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may know what is God's will, what is good and pleasing and perfect." Immediately after graduation in 1983, I entered seminary and became a priest, entered the seminary to become a priest in 1989. Like most Catholic priests, I preach, I teach, I speak in a lot of situations. But today I want to follow the example of my father. Some of the faculty might remember him. He was a great storyteller. As a matter of fact, when the radio station began, WERG, they asked him once a week to read a story over the air, and he did that week after week. My father knew, and all of us do, that a good story can illustrate in a very tangible and human way a deeper truth. A story holds a rich residue of human meaning. And so I'd like to rely on a few stories as I offer some words of counsel as you transition from your work here to the next step in your professional and academic career. My first word of counsel: unite your work to your deepest aspirations, even if they seem rather remote. The story is told about 3 men working in a rock quarry. They were all doing the exact same work, and it was hard manual labor. Someone went up to the first man, "What are you doing?" And he said, "What does it look like?" "I'm hewing rock." The same question was asked of the second man. He said, "I'm making a living to take care of my family, my wife, and my children." The same question was asked of the same man doing the same work at that quarry. And he said, "I'm building a cathedral." Unite your work to your deepest aspirations, even if they seem rather remote. St. Paul says in the letter to the Colossians, "Whatever you do, work at it with your whole heart. It is the Lord you are serving." A second word of counsel: be ready to share your best with others. You never know when they'll need it. This question's a little bit in a lighter vein. It was Ash Wednesday about 10 years ago. For whatever reasons that I can't remember, I needed to travel that day. I believe I was flying from Erie over to Rome. The day began with Ash Wednesday Mass, and I believe that Father Michael Kosicki imposed ashes on my forehead, as we do as Catholics on Ash Wednesday. Father Kosicki was very generous with those ashes, and they were very dark and bold. I got to the airport rather early and had a chance to have a cup of coffee in the airport deli. The waitress who came up to me was elderly. She said, "Father, I'm going to work all day, and I can't drive, and my husband isn't going to take me to church. But Father, you have so much ash on your forehead. Could you help me out?" And so I dipped my thumb into the ice water, then on my forehead, and then on hers. Always be ready to share your best with others. You never know when they'll need it. This third word of counsel: your work should bring out the best in you and in others. I was privileged in my doctoral work to have an Irish Dominican priest direct me. His name was Father Paul Murray. Father Paul tells the story shortly after the Iron Curtain fell. He was invited by some cloistered Catholic nuns to come to their convent in Prague and preach a retreat to them. So he got on the plane from Rome to Prague. He was not dressed in that very distinctive Dominican white habit, nor did he dress in that recognizable black Roman collar that priests often wear. He decided just to wear civilian clothes, as we say. He sat next to what he called a very chatty American. This guy seemed to be kind of bubbly and effervescent, and he was delighted to sit next to this Irishman. They were getting along fine in conversation, and at a certain point, the chatty American said to Father Paul, "So what do you do for a living?" Father Paul, in good humor, just said, "Guess." He tried a few, and he was wrong. And finally, Father Paul turned to him and he said, "Well, I'm a Catholic priest." The bubbly American, who was effervescent and cheerful, suddenly his face fell, and he became very serious. Father Paul said to him, "What do you do for a living?" He said, "Probably the most opposite thing that you can think of what you do. I'm flying to Prague to make pornographic films to distribute around the world." A priest and a pornographer on a plane to Prague, both to work with women, but in very different ways. Now, Father Paul is a good priest. Some of us priests might have been tempted to pull out the in-flight magazine and kind of make a shield, but he didn't. He continued to talk with this man flying to Prague, and the man admitted, "I don't like what I do. I fly around the world in comfort, but so often in these big cities where I fly to make these films, I find my way to a dark cathedral, and there I sit in the back pew and I cry. Your work should bring out the best in you and in others. Isaiah says, "The people that walked in darkness have seen a great light. Upon those who dwelt in the land of gloom, a light has shone." My final story hopefully will illustrate this. A life lived with integrity and virtue is beautiful, in season and out of season. About 15 years ago, I was on my annual priest retreat. I was at a priest retirement home where my spiritual director was. In the sacristy before Mass, I noticed two beautiful paintings on the wall of the sacristy where priests get ready for Mass. One was an image of the Last Supper. It was beautiful, filled with rich color. Another was a little bit more subdued, but it was the Sacred Heart of Jesus. I was taken by both images. I walked up to the Last Supper, and as I got closer and closer, and then was just about a foot or two away, I realized what I thought was this beautiful masterpiece was a paint by color painting that someone had done. And then as I turned and looked at the Sacred Heart image, it was an oil painting, probably 100 years old, where those deep oil colors had seeped deeply into the fiber of the canvas. And I thought, is my life going to be a paint by number that looks good from afar, but up close you can see it's rather cheap? Or will I allow my life to be an oil painting of God, where he strives to dip his pen into the contours of my mind and heart and words and life and allow something beautiful to come forward? You see, the life of virtue is attractive. Virtue where we're committed to goodness. Even there's this beautiful passage in the gospel where a man comes closer to Jesus. His name is Nathanael. And he says, "This man is a true man of God. There's no guile in him." Even Jesus saw the beauty in Nathanael, this man of virtue. A life lived with integrity and virtue is beautiful, and we're attracted to it in season and out. And so unite your work with your greatest aspirations. May it bring out the best in you and others. Always save some of the best of yourself for the benefit of others. As you live virtuously, you will make the world a much more beautiful place. Dear graduates, you are surrounded by those who love you, support you, and have formed your minds, your hearts, and your hands. We're all proud of you. We promise you our prayers and support. In the words of St. Paul, do not conform yourself to this age, but be transformed by the renewing of your minds. May you know what is God's will, what is good, pleasing, and perfect. Congratulations, and God bless you.